All right, welcome everybody. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how you can make just a few small tweaks to your pop-up form on your website to just absolutely explode your email marketing revenue. Now, for some actual proof that what I'm going to share with you guys today really does work, let's look at one of my clients here, right? So this is a D2C e-commerce brand that we very recently started working with at my agency, Social Scout. Now, before we started working with them, this was their submission rate on their form, okay? 1.46%. Now, I do a lot of Klaviyo audits on e-commerce brands, and honestly, I almost always see pop-up forms of around 1 to 4% submission rates, which is very low and means you're missing out on a ton of warm leads being added to your email list and going through your welcome flow. So what did we do, right? We built them a new form, and in our first attempt, we managed to boost their submission rate from 1.4% to 6.5%. And that's just off of one attempt and one variation of that form. So over time, we'll get this form to 8, 9, and I've even gotten forms to as high as 11, 12%. Okay. So these are nice numbers and all, but how much extra revenue did they actually gain from this? So with their form at about 1.4 submission rate, they were making roughly about $4,000 per month from their welcome flow. Okay. With their new submission rate of 6.5%, we essentially, more than tripled their list growth and tripled the amount of people who are going through their welcome flow, which means we basically tripled their welcome flow revenue as well, right? Their welcome flow is now averaging about $11,000 per month. So essentially, we added an extra $8,000 per month in revenue to their business by simply making a few tweaks to their pop-up form. Okay, that's an extra $96,000 added to their business over the course of an entire year. Okay, so really powerful stuff here. I am basically going to tell you guys how to do this down to the wire. Okay, so here's another example of one of my clients' forms. 10% of all site traffic is being added to their email list and is going through their welcome flow. Okay, now before I get into it, really quickly, who am I? So my name is Philip Moldavanu. I run an email marketing agency specifically for e-commerce brands, and I've generated at this point over $5 million in added revenue for my clients using just emails. And so, all of my clients hit over 40% of their total store revenue coming only from email, which is honestly where you should be. That's kind of the standard nowadays. But anyways, let's get straight into it. So the pop-up form, quite literally the highest leverage piece of your email strategy. I think it's oftentimes overlooked by brand owners. The main thing to understand here is that pop-up forms are not just, create it and then forget about it, right? You need to constantly be testing new variations and running A/B tests to figure out what works best for your audience, right? Because every brand is different. Spending the time to really perfect your pop-up form can quite literally make you tens of thousands of dollars in free extra revenue every single month, as you just saw with that example I previously shared. So if your form is sitting below 5% right now, watch this video in its entirety. I am pretty much going to break down every single edit you can make to your pop-up form to improve submission rate and start making more revenue, right? Let's get right into it. So the very first thing you need to look at in order to get your form converting higher is your offer, okay? In other words, what incentive are you actually providing to people in exchange for their email address? People nowadays really do not like giving their information out, so it's important that you give them a good enough reason to. You could have the most beautiful pop-up form in the world. I've seen it a million times. You could have the, like I said, most beautiful pop-up form in the world, but it could still have a submission rate of 1, 2% because your incentive just isn't strong enough or doesn't align with your audience or just is non-existent, right? If you're simply saying like, hey, join my newsletter for updates on our brand, right? That's just not cutting it. And that's really not an incentive at all. People, like I said, are more protective of their personal data than ever before. So you need to make it worth their while. Now, with that being said, what are some possible incentives that you can actually run? Well, obviously there's, a financial incentive in the form of a discount. So these are most common. They work really well. The main one you'll see is either, 10 or 15% off your purchase. I've seen some lower ticket brands go as high as 20% off. I wouldn't really recommend going that high. Oftentimes in my experience, if your percentage discount is too high, it can actually sometimes have the opposite effect, and it kind of takes away from the overall feel of your brand, and it can kind of take away from your product's perceived quality. For most of you guys watching this, I would pick either 10 or 15% off. Now, if you're a brand selling higher ticket items, or, if you just have a high average order value, you're going to want to stay away from percentages and instead go for a dollar off incentive, right? So for example, this is one of our clients. They have a pretty high average order value of over $400-500. So, offering a 10%, a 15% off discount would be way too much, and it would just be giving away, too much of a discount, which would eat into their margins a little bit too much. So instead, what we do is we run a $25 off incentive. So it's still enticing, still makes people feel like they're getting somewhat of a deal, and still gets people to submit, all while kind of retaining their margins. Okay. Now, if you don't want to run any type of dollar or percentage discount in your form, nothing financial, there are still some different things you can do as an incentive, right? One method is to run a giveaway where you're basically encouraging people to sign up to be entered into your giveaway to, win something enticing or win something of value. Okay, this works very well depending on what you're giving away. I want to add in, if you do choose to do this, make sure that whatever you're giving away is actually worth it for the shopper. And what I mean by that, don't say you're going to give away like a $50 voucher when your product costs like $60 or something, right? Like, you want this to be meaningful, and it should be a pretty big giveaway. I recently spoke to a brand, for example, whose products are about $3,000 a piece, and they were running a giveaway to win a free product, right? So you're basically entering to potentially win $3,000, a $3,000 product, right? So that's, as you can imagine, they collected a ton of email addresses there. And so just as an example, that's something else you can do, and kind of test with your offer if you maybe don't want to give away like a hard 10 or 15% off discount, right? Now, another method, if you're in that bucket of not wanting to do a financial incentive, is you could make a free guide or a free training that teaches people something. So for an example, I run a pop-up form on my website where I'm basically offering a completely free, 31-page Black Friday prep guide in exchange for their email address. So, it basically highlights everything that you need to do in terms of email marketing to get set up and kind of be in the best position for the holidays. I have everything from flow diagrams in there, campaign schedules, everything you can think of is covered. Now, the reason this works so well for me is because the majority of people who visit my site, as you can imagine, are founders, CEOs of companies, marketing managers of e-commerce brands. So that free guide is of very high value to them, and it aligns well with what they actually need. Okay, so that's just kind of an example there, but get creative with this. It's all about kind of knowing what your audience would find interesting and what type of educational content would actually resonate with them, right? Now, another idea here, if you're ahead of a big sale, you can make the incentive, sign up to get early access to deals. So this is what I do with all my clients for Black Friday, especially. But just to kind of show you guys, there's a ton you can do here. Don't feel like you're only limited to a percentage off discount or, percentage off incentive. With that being said, though, I would recommend offering an incentive of at least 10 or 15% off if you can. In my experience, those do kind of convert the best. For those of you who are in that bucket of kind of being against incentives, I think it's important to note that, yes, you are giving away a very small portion of your margin in order to acquire their email, but in the long run, that really does pay for itself tenfold, considering, the amount of emails you're going to amass and that you can now advertise to for completely free, not to mention a large amount of those people who claim the discount, they're going to end up buying products with it immediately, right? So that's just kind of a bit about your offer, which is the first thing that you should look at in your pop-up form. Let's get into the next one, right? So next up, we have input fields. So it's just a fact that the more information you require someone to fill out, the lower the submission rate will be on that form. So if you're running a form like this, kind of asking for a million different things, you really are just shooting yourself in the foot. This company in particular is asking for email, birthday, and zip code. Okay, this isn't even the worst I've seen. I've seen brands literally ask for 8 different things, and that's just a huge no-no, right? It's important to remember, people are lazy, and they don't have the focus to sit there and fill out their email, their first name, their last name, their phone number. Like, what's next? Are you going to ask for their social security too? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's surprising to me how many brands are still running pop-up forms like this. basically, rule of thumb here, the less information you ask for, the better, right? My advice would be to only ask for their email address on one slide, right? So on the first slide, only email, nothing else. And then on the next slide, once they've already submitted their email, then you can ask for SMS, right? That way, you're making it extremely easy for the shopper. They don't have to think. They don't feel like you're being too invasive, and the amount of people submitting your form will go up. I guarantee it. Okay. So next up, the next piece of your pop-up that has a really big effect on submission rate is your teaser. So the teaser is basically the little piece of the form that pokes out on the screen when someone, closes out of the form, basically kind of reminding them that it's there. Now, these are super underrated. When your pop-up deploys, a lot of people naturally, actually the majority of people, are going to close out of the form without submitting their email, right? So what happens if one of those people kind of ends up, spending some more time on your site? Now they learn a little bit more about your brand. They maybe saw a couple products that piqued their interest, and now they actually decided like, hey, I do want to buy something now. And they remember, oh, that 10% off discount, like where'd it go? If you're not running a teaser, that pop-up form basically just disappears forever, and there's no way that they can actually go back and enter their email to get 10% off, right? Now, obviously, if you're running a footer form, they can enter their email down there, but the average consumer doesn't know to go to the bottom of the page and enter in the footer, right? They don't think like that. So turning your teaser on is super important, and it will help to increase that submission rate. Now, as far as like the best on-screen position to place the teaser itself, I generally like to put them on kind of like the bottom left corner of the screen, as you see here. You can also put it like on the left-hand side right here. There is, putting it here is a little bit more invasive in my opinion. But really just play around with this, figure out kind of what works. Generally, I would almost 100% of the time avoid putting a teaser on the top of the screen anywhere. I find that it's just missed a lot when you put it there. Also, most websites have these nav buttons on the top of the screen. And so you don't want it to look crowded or kind of like clashing. But that's teasers. If you're not running one, definitely 100% add one. Okay. So the next piece of your form that's going to improve your submission rate is your time delay. Okay. So basically, how long does it take for your form to actually deploy on the screen in front of the shopper? Okay. The biggest mistake I see with most brands is they don't ever test different time delays. They kind of just pick one and they run with it. Okay. So every brand is different, and every audience responds better to different time delays. Okay. Here is kind of a general rule of thumb when thinking about your time delays on your form. So for brands with super low ticket items and lower quality traffic visiting your site, you're going to want to keep the time delay to basically deploy immediately. Okay. By low quality traffic, I mean like if you're selling $10, $15 gadgets on TikTok, for example, you're going to want your form to pop out pretty much instantly, just because that quality, like I said, is lower, or that traffic rather is of lower quality. They're coming from TikTok. They were probably mid scroll. Their attention span's already destroyed, so they're kind of not really looking to shop around. They just kind of wanted to check something out really quick. So if you don't catch them immediately, they're just going to bounce and they're going to be out of there, right? And so aside from that, the majority of accounts that I've been in, whether it's a client of mine or I did an audit, whatever it was, right? The majority of accounts are going to want to have a time delay of at least a couple seconds. Okay. If you're running like an actual brand, which is what most of you watching this video are doing, you're going to want to stay away from immediate form deploys for the most part. When your form deploys immediately, it can kind of annoy people and it can kind of take away from the user experience of your website. If you think about it, you're not really giving shoppers a chance to even look around at your website or see any of your products. They kind of just land on the site and you're already, shoving a pop-up form in their face, kind of asking them for information. All right. So the goal is to let them explore for a little bit, maybe let them see a product or two that piques their interest, and then you can show them the pop-up form and they'll be much more receptive to it. Okay. But like I said, if you're selling low ticket products, I'm talking like $20 and under, try an instant deploy, see how it works. And then I would also play around and test maybe 3 to 5 seconds and see how that works. Okay. If you're not selling super low ticket, which is the vast majority of you watching this, I would play around with anywhere from 8 to 12 seconds. With a longer time delay, I think it's important to note less people will be technically viewing the form, but the people who do view it are going to be much more receptive of the form and of the incentive, and they're going to be much more likely to submit their email. So, you're actually going to be collecting more emails, even though slightly less people are going to be seeing the form, if that makes sense, right? Now, finally, if you're watching this and you're like a luxury or a higher end brand, first of all, your pop-up form should look a little bit different. It should be much less invasive and much more minimalistic, right? But that's a topic for another video. The time delay, however, for a luxury brand should be upwards of 15, maybe even 20 seconds, right? Showing one too fast might kind of take away from the appeal of your brand image, and take away from, like I said, the perceived quality of your brand. You don't want to spam people. You don't want to annoy people right off the bat. So really play around with this. Run A/B tests. Again, this is not something that you can fix overnight. It takes time. Keep at it. Eventually, you will figure out kind of what is the right time delay for your brand, okay, and for your audience. But next up, something else that you can really play around with that will almost 100% of the time help capture more emails is what's called a micro commitment. Okay, so we're actually going to be tapping into buyer psychology a bit here, which is kind of what makes this so effective. This right here on your screen now is, your standard pop-up form that is not running a micro commit. Okay, so it kind of starts off with, the usual empty box here where they're supposed to put in their email address. Now, the shopper is used to this. They've seen it a million times, okay? So a micro commitment kind of switches it up a bit, okay? Instead of just simply having, an empty box where the shopper is supposed to put in their email, instead what we do is on the first step, we simply just ask them, do you want to receive 10% off, or do you want to receive 15% off, right? And then down here, instead of having that empty box, we have just a simple button that they can click, right? Once they click the button, then they go to the next step in the form and the box appears where they can put in their email address, okay? So this is a very, very subtle trick. You'd be surprised at how much it actually affects submission rate. The whole, I guess, idea of it is people are more likely to finish a task once they've already started it, okay? That's why we want to get them to commit in some way in the beginning by clicking, yes, I want the discount, and then they move on to the next step. It's also really effective because the first step is much, much lower commitment for the shopper. You're not asking for any information. You're simply just asking like, hey, do you want a discount, right? And most people are going to click yes, okay? And so whereas a normal pop-up is kind of asking for something right off the bat, So try this out for yourself, see how it performs. Another great way to increase submission rate on your form, right? Now, this one right here is pretty straightforward, okay? The overall aesthetic of your form. So it's really just a matter of not cluttering your forms and making them much more aesthetically pleasing to the shopper. Like you've probably heard me say before a million times throughout this video and in all my other content, the average consumer nowadays has no attention span whatsoever. If you're showing people a form with a million different words, clashing colors, right? Like things like that really do affect the readability of your form and will ultimately mean less submissions. Okay, your form should be very simple and easy on the eyes, easy to read. This form on your screen right now is an example of what not to do. Okay, as you can see, there's a lot wrong here. For one, the colors make it pretty hard to look at. There's pink, there's black, there's white, just a million colors. They're clashing. It's not easy on the eyes. There's also just a million different things going on here, right? Like there's emojis, there's a background image behind the text that's kind of like cut off and hard to see. I don't need to say much more. You obviously understand my point here. Now, here's an example of a simplistic form that just gets the job done. Okay, there's nothing too crazy in this form. Simplicity is the move nowadays. Pretty simple one here. Just don't try to overcomplicate things in your form. Generally, less is more, and people just respond to, clean, organized information where everything is just laid out for them and they don't have to work hard or think about it to figure something out or figure out what the next step is, right? Now, if you guys want, more free email marketing tips and tricks, I basically spill all of my knowledge in my free newsletter. So join that if you'd like to know more about little tricks like these. I send quite frequently on there. Also, if you're interested in me doing a free audit on your Klaviyo account, feel free to book some time in my calendar and we can have a chat. I'll put the link in the description of this video. Basically, I'll go into your account. I'll tell you everything that needs to be, fixed or added, why it's important, how to actually do everything as well. Also, I would just love to sit down and chat with any of you guys to answer any questions you might have, walk you through something, provide a demo, whatever it is. And of course, I post more content and tips on my Instagram, so go check that out. With that being said, thank you guys for watching till the end. Feel free to subscribe if you got some value from this. I'm going to be posting a lot more, content on this channel going forward, including things like live walkthroughs of accounts, live demos of different strategies. So yeah, guys, remember, pop-up form optimization, it's a pretty long process, right? It doesn't happen in 3 days, okay? You're not going to hit 10, 11% overnight, but just keep at it, A/B test everything, and eventually you will get there. So thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.